In this video, we're going to look at some of the vocabulary that might be useful for mechanical engineering, in particular focusing on metals. Before we look at those words, just want to explain that the words I've chosen are intended as an introduction to some of the language related to materials and metals. They're really given as a basic explanation of some of the terms you might come across. They're not complete technical definitions, and they're not a complete list of all the words you might need to know on the topic, but hopefully they'll be a good first step. So what are we going to look at? Here are some of the areas we're going to look at, language we're going to look at to talk about metals. Look at some of the language to discuss the properties, so things like malleable, fusible, ductile, and then talking about its conductivity. We'll also look at the metals, non-metals, metalloids, alloys, ferrous and non-ferrous, precious metals, and cast and forged metals. Then we'll have a little section looking at the pronunciation of some metals in terms of how many syllables or beats they have in the word. So first of all, what are the properties or qualities of metals? Metals are typically hard, shiny, malleable, fusible, ductile, and good at electrical and thermal conductivity. Already in this statement, we've got quite a few interesting words: malleable, fusible, ductile, and conductivity. Fusible is talking about how easily melted something is. Conductivity is talking about how easy it is for electrons or electricity or heat to pass through something. That leaves us with malleable and ductile, or malleability and ductility for the noun forms. These ones can be quite close in their meaning. They both describe a material's ability to deform, so to change shape, size, or volume when under stress, which might be a load that's been applied, or it might be the environmental conditions, such as heat. So they're both the same in that sense, but they cannot be used interchangeably. They're not synonyms. They don't have exactly the same meaning. So malleability is usually used to describe a material that can withstand being hammered or rolled out into a sheet, so into a thin, flat surface without breaking. And with that, we talk about compressive strength. Ductile, on the other hand, talks about strength in terms of a material being stretched out, so like a thread, and its ability to deform under stress without snapping when being stretched out like a thread, and that we call tensile strength. Sometimes we want to describe and group elements on the periodic table by their properties, so by their qualities. And in this case, sometimes people refer to metals, ones that have properties of metals, ones that don't, the non-metals. But then we also have this word, the metalloids. Metalloids are elements that have properties that fall between metals and non-metals. Another term that you might come across when looking at metals is alloys. So alloys are where you have a combination, two or more elements joined together, and at least one of them is a metal. This is done to get better properties than a single metal would be able to provide by itself. There are two broad categories then we can look at of this. Ferrous alloys are alloys that always have iron as the dominant component, and non-ferrous alloys where there's little or no iron. We can look at some ways of forming or shaping metals. Metals can be cast. This means that you pour a molten, a liquid or melted metal into a mold. A mold's a container, and when the metal cools and hardens, it will take on the shape of that mold. Forged metals are formed by compressive, so inwards force, perhaps hammering, for example. Before we finish, I thought we'd have a brief look at the pronunciation of some of the metals. A key part to saying them clearly can be getting the number of syllables, that's the number of beats in the word, right. And this varies for different metals. For example, aluminium has got al, u, min, e, so it's got 5 syllables. Then we've got titanium and magnesium, so ti, tain, e, mag, knees, e, both of those have 4 syllables. Then we've got copper, iron, nickel, and silver. So each of those have 2, copper, iron, nickel. Then the last ones just have 1 beat, lead, zinc, tin, gold. So in this video, I've just given a few words to start you thinking about the vocabulary around metals. So we've looked at some of the language that might describe properties, for example, malleable, fusible, ductile. Those are all adjectives. We could also have malleability, fusibility, ductility, and also talking about their thermal and electrical conductivity. We've talked about how elements can be categorized into metals, non-metals, and metalloids that have elements of the properties of both metals and non-metals. We've talked about instances where a metal is combined with something else to form alloys, and these can be ferrous, where iron is dominant, or non-ferrous. We also have precious metals. These are things like gold and silver, cast metals, and forged metals.